reconvene here for a second forum. This forum is for District 4, Linn County Supervisor. I'm Jean McMenamin with the League of Women Voters of Linn County. The League is a nonprofit volunteer political organization which neither supports nor opposes any candidates or political party. The League encourages citizen participation in government and is open to any citizen 18 years and older. This forum is part of our voter education efforts to help voters make informed decisions at the upcoming elections. We hope over the course of this program you'll learn more about the candidates and what they hope to do for our state, county, and city. The candidates, Randy Ray and Brent Olson, as I said, are running for District 4 Linn County Supervisor. And the rules for the forum are each candidate will have 2 minutes for an opening statement. We've decided that Randy is going to go first and Brent will go second. After that, we'll present questions from the audience and there'll be a timekeeper. And you will each have 2 minutes to respond. At 30 seconds, a timer will indicate that for you. At 15 seconds, another one, and then a stop sign when you're supposed to stop. You will each have a chance to answer the question, but if someone would like a rebuttal to the response, that's fine. You'll get 2 minutes for that, and the person then, again, will get another 2 minutes. So hopefully we can get into some depth on these. Candidates will confine their statements and responses to relevant issues and refrain from personal attacks. The forum is being recorded by Rapid Cash, who's in the back, for Neighborhood Network News and will be available to watch on both the League of Women Voters LinnCounty.org website and on the Neighborhood Network News.com website. Please, if you haven't already done so, turn off your cell phones or put them on mute. If at any time during the forum you can't hear the moderator or the candidates, please let us know. We request that you treat all candidates fairly. Please remain quiet throughout the forum, no clapping, cheering, or calling out, with the exception of at the conclusion of their closing statements, you can clap for the candidates if you wish. You're encouraged to submit questions and just raise your hand if you have a question. Someone from League will come around and get the question. We will get started with our opening statements, and Randy's going to go first.
Thank you. Hi, my name is Randy Ray. I'm a Linn County Supervisor, District 4. I'm a school teacher. I don't know how many times I've had to say that over the last couple of months, but it's been several, I'll tell you. I'd like to thank the League of Women Voters for putting the forum on. It's excellent. I'd like to thank my opponent, Mr. Olson, for showing up here tonight so we can discuss serious issues about the county. A little bit about my background. I'm from Marshalltown High School, which is where I graduated, where I was involved in several activities there at the high school level and also in my community. After high school, I went to University of Northern Iowa, where I got my teaching degree. Then I went to Drake University, where I got my master's in secondary school administration. As far as my background with my brothers are, I have 4 brothers. They're all teachers, they're all educators, and our family obviously education is very important, and just as well as serving our community and serving each other. Every day, I am entrusted in taking the most valuable possessions people have, and that is their children. And with that, I have to be compassionate, I have to be a problem solver, I have to be a decision maker, and I have to be patient. And that's probably the most important thing with young kids. I'm a businessman. I'm also a coach. I've been a teacher for over 20 years in the school district here in Cedar Rapids. And every day I try to think of myself trying to be better and making other people better around me. I'm hoping to take this job and serve it. And that's what I tell my community, and that's what I tell my kids. They need to serve the community. And I'm here to basically to lead by example, and that is to help to be a community leader. Thank you.
I want to My name is Brett Olson. I'm currently your Linn County Supervisor, and I'm asking for your support for another term as Linn County Supervisor. I want to thank the League of Women Voters and everybody in attendance, and for Randy for showing up here and agreeing to participate. Public service is a privilege. It's an honor, and I think you need to subject yourself to questions and scrutiny in a public forum like this, and that's why I really appreciate the League of Women Voters putting this on. There was an article recently about candidates who choose not to subject themselves to public scrutiny or questions, and they're running for positions in the legislature and Congress that determine our future. And I think it's very important that you come here and articulate your ideas and where you stand on the issues. First, I want to say I'm grateful. I have a sense of gratitude for the people who've entrusted me as their public servant these last 2 terms since the flood of 2008. I have 2 children, and I really feel like I'm making a difference in my little rectangle of 99 rectangles in Iowa that make up Iowa's county system. So everybody tries to make a difference how they can, and that's my little sphere where I try to make a difference. And as I said, I think it was quoted in the Gazette endorsement, that I believe in pushy, quote unquote, pushy leadership. And that's what I have tried to do by questioning different policies and pushing the community forward to have a better community. I don't believe in just caretaking government. I believe in actually accomplishing certain goals, and I want to articulate those to you tonight so that I can gain your support. Thank you.
First question will go to Randy, and then you'll have 2 minutes. Iowa City has Coralville Reservoir for flood protection. Has any study been done for an upstream lake for flood control on the Cedar River? And the opinion of the writer, it would be an economic engine for Linn County.
Could you repeat that?
I certainly can. Iowa City has Coralville Reservoir for flood protection. Has any study been done for an upstream lake for flood control on the Cedar River?
I'm not sure if there's been a study of the lake. I think there should be. I know that the Corps of Engineers was involved as far as flood protection in 2008 and giving their suggestions. I do think that it needs to be, if it hasn't been done, that'd be super. A lot of countries, that's what they do. They build dams up above, the dirt dams, that they can break the flood fields to control the water downstream. I think that would be an excellent ideal to look at. I'm not an engineer, but I do think that we need to look into whatever flood protection we can have. And if it hasn't been, it should be studied. Like I said, I know that the Corps of Engineers have looked into flood protection and the wall that we're going to be probably talking about tonight versus both sides versus one side. But I do think that we need to take and get the water as far as taking care of upstream if all possible. Yes.
You want to pass it through? Thank you.
Part of what I call pushy leadership is pushing certain issues, and one of them that I've been very conscious about is conservation and environmental issues. And when I talk about pushy leadership, I mean Cedar Rapids City Council would love nothing more than for the county to use its bonding capacity and contribute tens, if not hundreds of millions of dollars towards the flood walls. I don't think that is the approach that the county should take. I think that the city and the county should work together, and our role should be that upstream water management, and let the river breathe upstream to help communities like Palo that sit in a floodplain. So some of the ways that you can do that is the Iowa Water and Land Legacy issue that the voters passed in 2010 overwhelmingly to create a trust fund to help pay for some of these water capacity issues. So far, that has not been funded by the Iowa legislature. But that hasn't stopped me from pushing that. And we have another version here locally, the bond issue that's up here. I think somebody said it was a money grab, but it's far from a money grab. We actually listed out, and we're working with different groups like Nature Conservancy and other groups to acquire this very land upstream of the Cedar River and the Wapsipinicon to have floodplains and wetlands, just like you see in the Cedar River Greenbelt. When you go out to Wickiup every spring and you see egrets in the marsh land that's flooded, that's what it's designed to do. And so we can work with Cedar Rapids by us doing the upstream work and they do the flood walls.
Thank you. Next question deals with urban sprawl. Other than wind, Iowa's only natural resource is its farmland. Urban sprawl has covered since 1980 the acreage of one Iowa county. Have you any concerns about urban sprawl? And Mr. Olson?
I do have concerns about urban sprawl, but we live in a country where we have private property rights. No one forces farmers to sell their land. They do it willingly to the highest bidder, and usually land is used for its highest and best use. Most of the time I agree with that, but there are things that we can do at a county level to ensure that cities, which have the power of annexation, and we really can't stop that to any great degree, but we can, and we do have a urban and rural land use plan, and we encourage and actually put incentives and de-incentivize certain urban sprawl practices. So we do have a lot of northern sprawl by Cedar Rapids, and to some extent Hiawatha and Robbins have become communities that in Marion that have seen a lot of housing development, but along with that has come a lot of jobs. So you have to balance. Farmland is far more productive than it was 50 years ago, so I don't think it's a fair comparison to say that because we've lost farmland that somehow that's a bad thing, but I do think we need to incentivize fill-in communities like you're seeing with downtown Cedar Rapids right now, and a resurgence in different areas like Newville and Mobile Jackson and things like that.
Yes, there is a concern. I'm concerned about the urban sprawl because basically there is farmland being taken away from the county more and more, it seems like. And the annex, you say that the people have opportunity, option to sell, not when they're annexed in, and they're forced basically into doing situations from their farmland. So I am concerned about the urban sprawl. In that of the county buying land up from taxpayer dollars that may be being used for own personal uses of the county, their own agenda, and taking that farmland out of production. So we have our biggest asset we have in Iowa is our farmers and our farmland, and we need to protect it from some of the urban sprawl that's happening.
Thank you. How do we balance conservation and trails?
Well, I think that this is going to be obviously a topic that's dear to Mr. Olson's heart about trails and parks and that. And I think the ideal of it's great that we have trails and parks. I'm not sure that everyone uses trails and parks and how much the percentage of people that are using our trails and parks. We need to be very concerned about that everyone pays taxes and that we may have our own agendas in mind that we have where that money should go. I think that one of the things I'm going to do, I'm going to have an advisory board. This advisory board is going to help me as far as making decisions on spending money from the taxpayer. Just because my agenda may not be the agenda of your dollars being spent. So I want to make sure, because it is your dollars, And with that, we need to balance out that there are land that's being gobbled up, then there's for parks and trails, the farmland, and that of a quality of life that we need here for jobs and for that of boosting our economy.
You know, Teddy Roosevelt is my favorite president. And the reason he's my favorite president is pretty much encapsulated at the top of every entrance into a national park for all the people. The national parks and then the insurgence or resurgence of parks at county and city levels has probably been one of America's greatest things because it's free, it's for all the people. I hear from city council leaders and others about economic development, and that is important. And they work hard on those issues. They may offer tax incentives to lure companies here. They may create situations to get people here to revitalize and energize our economy. But those people want to raise families and be part of a community, and they have to have amenities, especially when we're competing against other communities for those jobs. So trails, you're not allowed to confiscate private land for trails. It's not allowed. So there's no eminent domain of farmland or anything else to take trailhead. We have seen a huge popularity in trails. In fact, businesses have sprung up along the Cedar Valley Nature Trail, and to a large degree, Nubo's resurgence is because of trails. You see a lot of these businesses that cater to bicyclists and to people who want to get outside and recreate. Iowa has one of the lowest amounts of public lands, and so I'm not talking about gobbling up private land, but I am talking about having a system of trails that makes sense if we're going to invest in them, and it goes through each community so everybody can use them.
Would you like a rebuttal? 2 minutes.
Mr. Olson mentioned that the parks are free. That land was bought by taxpayers. When you're buying, I believe, on 40 acres maybe for Morgan Creek, prime farmland. That was quite an expense that the taxpayers paid for that land. So parks aren't free. They cost. They cost to maintain, they cost to develop, and they cost for the price of the land. So they're not free.
Parks are free for the user. Of course, we have tax money that goes in for many uses, and this is a big difference between myself and my opponent. Again, it goes back to, do you want somebody that's just a caretaker and looks at ledger sheets, or do you want somebody that's actually going to provide workable and realistic solutions to what the community's needs and wants are? It is 78 acres that we invested in. Judge Harstead, Brent Harstead's family, actually owned that land, knew it very well, and they didn't give it to us, but that family did prior to that give over 100 acres to Morgan Creek Park. If you go back to the 1950s and see where Squaw Creek Park is, Pinnakin Ridge Park, Mansell Bridge, when the voters were asked to tax themselves to acquire those lands, they passed it by 80%. 80% of the vote. When does that happen anymore? Because they wanted places where you could recreate. Central City's biggest economic engine is Pinnakin Ridge Park. We have millions of people, and we keep track of it. It generates $50 million of economic development in Linn County, just the county parks. So when they were getting all excited about a casino that was going to generate $75 million, I just said, that's great. I'm all for what people want to do. I'm not going to stand in the way, but our parks generate $50 million. That's huge. So, you get tax money from economic development, and our parks have played a key role. You have to have a quality of life. And people overwhelmingly said they want these amenities, and they're willing to pay for them.
Thank you.
back to flood protection. Have you considered the county establishing a public bank to finance flood protection interest-free?
Well, I know who this question's coming from. Mr. Robin Cash. I have just begun my research of public banks, and I understand that this is an alternative in North Dakota. That being said, my default position is that the government should not be involved in those things that can be best done by the private sector. That being said, I'm not going to write it off immediately. I am doing my due diligence on it. We have a AAA bond rating in Linn County because of our budget practices. Only county in the Iowa, one of the only counties in Iowa, one of the only governmental entities that has the highest gold standard budget rating. So when we borrow less than anyone else when we choose to borrow money, which we don't choose very often because we maintain fiscally conservative practices at Linn County. We invest in those things that we absolutely need to do. Like, for instance, a few years ago, we got together with Marion and City of Cedar Rapids and our Linn County and borrowed $18 million to redo our communication system for the sheriff and the police and the ambulance and the rural fire departments and everybody else. So we borrowed that at less of a rate than anyone else could have done, and we've made that investment, which has benefited the taxpayers. So that's just one example of fiscal conservative practice, but actually accomplishing something at the same time. We have one of the lowest debts for debt ratios for any county our size.
Oh, Mr. Olson, you sound like a Republican for a while there. As far as the private sector does not to be involved with that of the government, and that's what it comes to as far as we're dealing with the bank. We want obviously the private sector to take care of it, or the government, they have less regulation and not to be involved in that kind of issues.
Next question, I've combined a couple that relate to what is your opinion regarding the number of supervisors necessary to represent all of Linn County? And also your view on how those supervisors are compensated.
This is obviously one of the hot topics here in the Linn County Supervisor race. I am for 5 supervisors. We need the representation. I think that the system is excellent, the way it's drawn the districts and representing everybody in the county. I don't think that it's not the system that's broke, it's the people in the system that have caused the problem, and that is that they have overcompensated themselves with their pay. I have one on record that I will do the job for $70,000. I think that is a fair pay. That was in 2009 when they became supervisors. That is, I believe, a full-time position. They're doing it at $70,000. That saves taxpayers over $33,000 a year, $135,000 for 4 years. But I do think we need 5 supervisors to represent the county. And I think it's done well the way the districts are divided too. So, thank you.
I agree that there needs to be 5 supervisors, and I think they need to be by district. I think that it's been a very, very good thing since 2009 to have district representation so that Marion and other communities and the rural interests are represented better than they were prior to that. And if you went back to 3 supervisors, you'd most likely go back to a countywide system. You'd have, well, one, I think that these offices are nonpartisan. Republican, Democratism, we don't decide hardly anything. I'd say 99% of what we do is non-political in the least. We see things like the minimum wage are very rare that we deal with. So, but you would end up with basically probably 3 Democrats from Cedar Rapids. And I think that would not be a good thing for the county and a decision-making executive authority. Also, I believe that the compensation, I'm willing to look at compensation if it remains equal for the auditor, treasurer, recorder, and the supervisor. So all of those positions are paid the same right now. And I maintain that the supervisors actually have a lot more to do than those other ministerial positions. But if they come to me and they say, we want to reduce by such and such amount, I'm fine with that. I'll look at that. I voted against the pay increases because I felt like you need to stand for election for what you propose. And so I'm standing for election now. I voted against those prior pay increases. But I'm saying that I think supervisors need to be paid the same as every other county official, except for the sheriff and the county attorney. And so if we decide to go somewhere else, then they all get together, I'm for that, that's fine.
Would you like a rebuttal? 2 minutes.
I don't believe that the compensation board, the way it works right now, the current compensation board, the way it works is that you can appoint somebody on the compensation board. I think it should be more open to the public and whether they get a raise or not. And also, as far as dealing with the ideal of you didn't vote on a pay raise, but you took it. And it was, I think, a good amount of money. And as far as looking into it now, it's a little late. But I think that the compensation board needs to be looked at as far as how it raises. I do not think they're equal across the board. I do think, as you said, the county attorney and sheriff and the auditor possibly, but the biggest thing is probably looking into job descriptions and defining more of the job descriptions and justifying the job and being more transparent so that maybe those salaries will not be a concern for the citizens here. If they know exactly what the county supervisors do and exactly what the auditor do, and the job descriptions are clear cut, then the salaries could come afterwards and the taxpayers may understand more where those dollars are being spent. Thank you.
Well, the compensation board is run by state statute. We have no ability to run the compensation board. The only thing that we can do with the compensation board is the supervisors, the supervisors can appoint 2 members, and then each county elected official appoints a member. And then we make presentations to them based on what the statute says, comparables and that kind of thing. And every year we've, except for this last year, have voted they pick out some number based on their reasoning, which is in public minutes, and we've reduced every one of those. In fact, in the first few years, we had freezes for not only the elected officials, but for the employees. So, and my opponent says, well, I took it. Well, yeah, you can't actually, his plan is to go in and say, oh, I'm only going to take 70,000. Well, you can't do that. The IRS regulations and the federal government won't allow you to do it. So he'll take the regular pay, and he gets paid $89,600 as a high school teacher at Washington. If he retires, he'll have full benefits and IVers. So he'll take 50-some thousand, plus he'll get 103,000, and I guess he'll give it to charity or something, and that's fine. I give mine to charity as well. So you'll take it too. So I think that's not a very accurate point to make. And I just think that congressmen and other people who say that they're going to cut their salaries until the budget's balanced and stuff, that's a political ploy. I'm more interested in the $750 million over the 4 years that we're in charge of and how we allocate that. And anybody who knows me knows I'm a fiscal conservative, and I've looked at every line of that budget and I make it work. I believe in lean government that works, not government just to be anti-government.
We have a diverse county. How do you balance rural and urban interests and concerns? We have a diverse county. How do you balance rural and urban interests and concerns?
Okay.
And I believe I'm with Mr. Olson first.
Well, I think that I have a good perspective on that. I grew up in the county, so to speak. I actually live in the county right now, not in the city, live in rural Marion. I grew up, like I said, with an ag background. I have a unique perspective, I think, and understand agriculture and what it means to our economy. You know, we sometimes get asked to decide issues like, should there be a hog confinement facility? And we like to, as the county, we get asked to give our 2 cents on it, even though the Iowa legislature hasn't allowed the counties to really have any effect on it. So I don't know why we do that. I've always voted for the siting of hog confinement facilities. I know it's probably not very popular, but it's Iowa's #1 commodity and #1 industry, and I've always supported farmers and livestock growers, and I think that that's a good perspective to have on the county. But at the same time, I work with city governments and understand those issues, and people who live in the city want their county government to work for them. So I think you have to have a ability to understand both perspectives and balance those, and it's the kind of people you put in office that aren't swayed one way or the other, that can meet with those people and understand the different interests that I think we have more in common than we have as opposed to each other.
Well, first of all, you got to attend the council meetings and go up to the counties that you're representing in the urban areas and talk to the farmers. And that's, first of all, was opening up communication for them. And that is very vital. I've talked to many of the counties around here, many of the, I should say, Central City, Bertram, and about their concerns. And first of all, they don't feel like they're being heard. And that's the first thing. You have to hear and listen to their concerns. That you pay taxes. Farmers pay a huge amount of taxes. And with the water quality, which we'll get to, and how much that's going to cost them, and the issue that they're dealing with, I just think that in order to get a better cooperation between the cities and counties, you have to listen. And part of that, again, I'll have my advisory board, which will be represented from those people. They're all in the urban areas there and in the rural areas, so we'll be very diverse and having women on there and making sure that they're being listened to so that everyone feels their tax dollars are going where they need to be.
Would you like a rebuttal?
Well, it was kind of implied that somehow, and maybe it was the whole board, the board as a whole is not paying attention, but certainly I am. I'm in Central City all the time. I'm in Bertram all the time. In fact, they've been endorsed by the mayor of Central City and the mayor of Bertram. Sorry. And I go to a Farm Bureau meeting all the time. I see Cindy at least, well, we have a formal meeting once a year, but I've been actually endorsed by many Farm Bureau leaders in this county and count them as some of my greatest supporters. So the Fair Board and the work I've done with the Fair, I'm very in touch with the rural community here. And so I disagree that somehow I'm not listening. Perhaps the board could be better at that. But you look over the last 8 years, our secondary roads have improved dramatically, our farm to market roads. Some of the things that we've done with our road budget used to be cut. We fully funded it every year that I've been in office to the maximum amount allowed by law. Never cut. When we had really bad budget problems after 2009, right when I got elected, one of the very first things that we did was we had to do some cuts, and I said no to rural public libraries. That was something that we weren't going to sacrifice. And that was because I was out there meeting with constituents and with those people who run those libraries and made sure that those were big things for the community, like Coggin, for instance, really had a push on that. So I'm out there all the time. I hope that people understand that now. That's one of the benefits of having supervisors by district, because most of my district is rural and outside of Cedar Rapids.
As you talk to people door to door, what are the priorities you're hearing about?
Well, I'll piggyback on a little bit of the, what Mr. Olson said. Out and about, I don't know where his out and about is. Maybe it's out and about in the city doing something besides what he should be doing, I don't know. But as far as what I hear from the strong people in the urban areas is that, again, they are not being represented. They feel like their tax dollars are being sucked up into Cedar Rapids and different things, such as one example was the artwork. They thought down at Green Square was maybe a little bit over much for what they thought as far as their tax dollars. I also think that they are concerned about the pay of the Linn County supervisors and what they're doing as far as with that, which I think there should be more transparency. That's one of the things that in a good job description for the supervisors. And basically, they are a public servant. So being a public servant, you need to be transparent and you need to know where your hours are being spent. And as far as, that's what I hear, that they're, especially in the urban areas of Central City, Bertram, in the council, and from those people in that area, they're concerned about their roads too, which I'm sure that we'll get to, and that of that being gravel and not being maintained. So those are concerns. I think they're always concerns, usually the roads are.
Well, I'm hearing quite a bit different version from people. Certainly I do hear from people who think the roads can be improved. There are other people, I've been to their doors, that don't think that the county should do anything. So those are probably some of the people that are talking to Randy, that I disagree, and I don't have a problem telling them that if you're voting for me, you're gonna be voting for somebody that is both fiscally conservative, but that believes in accomplishing things for the county and moving it forward. And so what I'm hearing is that people do want, and they appreciate the work that I've done on parks and trails and conservation. They do appreciate the work that I've done with the Metropolitan Planning Organization and our transportation issues and the work I've done with our secondary road system. In fact, that one of the projects I've been working on for the last few years is Tower Terrace Interchange, and I'm surprised at the number of people who know the work that's going on and how hard it is to get that into the state budget so that we can actually accomplish that rather than talking about it for 20 years. When Highway 100 was going through, people knew that I came up with a plan for the Morgan Creek Park, and that I've been talking about a trail system to follow Highway 100. So when the growth comes out there, inevitably with Cedar Rapids, people have amenities rather than trying to do it afterwards, like we had here on Highway 13, where we had to go underneath the highway and close it because nobody thought that connecting the trail between the two, the bikers want. So we're actually taking care of that before we put in the highway. So I'm hearing a lot different thing, and I'm also hearing a lot about Medicaid and that issue with regard to a lot of the programs we have on mental health. And that's a big thing too, I'm hearing.
What is your position regarding the Linn County Water and Land Legacy Bond? And we're with Mr. Olson first.
Well, my position is that I support it. Obviously, I've worked on it for a number of years. I've been intimately involved with appointing the Conservation Board that is ultimately going to administer this if it passes. I've always known that getting 60% of the vote for something of this magnitude would be very difficult. So I've always said that it's probably a 10% chance and a 90% chance that on the first try it won't happen. But I've been pleasantly surprised that I feel like a majority of the people at least support the concept of what we're doing, and they're talking about or offering suggestions on the implementation. So eventually, if we don't do anything about water quality, the state doesn't do anything, and then the county doesn't do anything, the EPA is going to come in here, and if you think you've seen big government from Linn County or from the state of Iowa, you just wait till you get the EPA in here telling you exactly what you need to do with your water sources. You're going to see, if you don't do things and make this investment now, I look at it like the Americans with Disabilities Act. Cedar Rapids chose not to spend any money, and now they have to remediate, spend $30 million over the next few years to comply with that act. Whereas Linn County, we spent a few $100,000 bringing in consultants to show us what we needed to do, had that plan, so when they tried to come in and do that, we already had our plan, so we're not being forced to do anything. We're doing the same, I'm trying to do the same thing with our water quality. Getting ahead of it so that we have things so that Linn County won't be taxed or pushed around by the federal government later on.
Well, when you talk water quality, that's, for everybody, that's important. I mean, we all drink water, we're all concerned about water. The issue I have is with the water quality is it's not detailed. It doesn't tell what you're going to spend the $20 million. It needs to be more detailed. You got to have a plan. The state is already having problems with water quality and the conservation board because they didn't have a plan. You can throw money out there, and the farmers already have big restrictions on what they can do from the state, from the federal government. They're already involved. One more time, we're going to have government involved, and that's with the quality water. And we all want good, clean drinking water, and we are going to try to stay ahead of that. We are doing our part. We just need a better plan. We just don't need to have necessarily the $20 million. Also, currently at the local option tax is that we have 25% of it goes to tax relief, 25% of it goes to that of conservation, which is $1.5 million, I believe, or close to that we already have going to conservation, parks, trails, water quality, and all that. Don't get me wrong, all of us want water, clean water, but at the same time, when you tack $20 million and don't give any kind of direction where that money is going to be spent, that's where my concern is. So I know exactly what the plan is. Mr. Olson knows that plan. He knows it better than, I guess, anybody in the state, because as far as what was read in the paper today, nobody really has a clear-cut plan. They have suggestions, but there's not a real clear-cut plan where that money's going. Also, that another $20 million going to parks and trails, that should not even be on that ballot. That should be a separate issue totally, should be not on the ballot with clean water.
Yeah, that's just, I think what you've heard is a complete difference in how we view things. That's just a kind of like a fundamental not understanding of the issue. Like with trails and parks, the trails and parks have actually done more for water quality because we've actually bought up some very bad land that was not very useful and turned it into prairie plantings and stuff. The thing before here was that when the Abbey Center was torn down, somebody said, well, you should drive by, there's weeds all over the place. Those aren't weeds. That's a prairie. That's a prairie restoration project. When you do those kind of things near rivers and streams, it actually improves water quality. So when you buy up an abandoned railroad crossing that's near a line that's near a river or stream, and you plant it with prairie plantings, and you give it to the people, and the people use it, that actually benefits the water quality around it. And so there are many farms, down near Highway 30, flood event, so 20-some farmers helping this farmer get the crop out before it flooded. That happens at different places all along these riparian areas. And that land should, to the extent that we can, we need to put it into, we need to encourage and pay for buffer strips or turn that land into parks and rec areas so that the water quality improves along that area. So it's just a fundamental disagreement, and I think it's not understanding how we can improve water quality. But if we don't do anything, I can guarantee you the EPA is going to come in, or you're going to see a Des Moines situation with a lawsuit. It's going to happen. Mayor Corbett stood up in front of Farm Bureau and told it's going to happen. And you can stick your head in the sand, but it's going to happen. So I'm trying to get ahead of it. This is like how I approach most issues. Try to look into the future and solve the problem rather than make a political point.
I think Randy'd like to respond.
Yes. I didn't know all the runoff and all the problems that have with quality water is from our parks, and that we need to expand the areas around our parks and buy up more farmland and taxpayers' dollars to keep our water clean from the parks that the runoff is happening. I don't see that, and I think that Mr. Olson saying not understanding the issue. I think being from Iowa, most of us understand about the watersheds and understand about runoff of water and keeping water as far as not running off into areas, and fertilizer and all that. And I think, again, the state is doing an excellent job, or trying to do a job. They put a lot of effort in trying to restrict farmers as far as fertilizing and taking and making sure they're not plowing everything up, and that there are good conservation issues that they're doing. I don't know how many times we're going to hear parks and trails tonight, but I guess we're going to hear it a lot. I'm not anti-parks and trails, I'm just anti as far as where our money's maybe being spent in all these areas. And so the water runoff from parks, I don't think is the issue. That's, again, if you want to take and get a detail of what you're going to do. Like I said, water quality to me is more than just swampland that you're letting, or marshes and that kind of thing. There's a lot to do with that, and you need to have more of a game plan. And that the parks and trails are the issue when dealing with water quality, because I think the parks and trails, at least the trails I go on and the parks I go in, they're not plowed up right next door, and the water runoff from parks and trails are not causing a water quality problem.
Moving on to mental health and developmental disabilities in the managed care system. What are your thoughts on the transition that's occurred and the current situation? What are your thoughts on the transition to the managed care system that's been occurring over the last couple of, or 2 or 3 years?
For mental health.
Oh, mental health, that's why I thought,
Mental
yeah,
health,
mental health and disabilities, that's why I didn't hear that part, that's why I was wondering. I am concerned, part of that is, I know that Mr. Wilson will mention this too, is, and I know that Ben Rogers is involved in this, and some of it's dictated by the state about what's happening with mental health and with our kids with disabilities. And I know from personal, because I have been involved in, with a child that, my stepchild that was with disabilities, and basically can't speak, can't talk, can't walk, and that's basically awarded to the state. And I know Ben is going through all that, and I appreciate that, Ben, that what you've done with work with that, and sometimes your hands are tied with the state, taking it and making these individuals, taking them out of some of the programs they were in and trying to get them into the private sector to be more effective. I'm not sure the state does a very good job with it as far as with financing it. Obviously, the states a lot of times knows they dictate things, but not a lot of times finance things, and that's very difficult with local government. And this is one of the issues that I know that probably Brett's probably working on too, and it's something that we need to look at, because there's a lot of people right now who are kind of upset that their kids are with disabilities. They get to a position where they're very comfortable, their work environment, they share a community, And the whole idea was to take those kids and get them out in the real world and the real workforce and try to get them more hands-on this and that. But they don't understand that's their community and they feel very comfortable in that community. And so I'm concerned about them being displaced. But I know that both, I'm sure Brad, but I know that Ben is working on that issue. Thank you, Ben.
The transition in mental health care responsibilities to a regional system was well intentioned, I think. I do think that the higher up you go in government, the more you can find that, I won't say necessarily waste, but a lot of inefficiencies. I think the lower in government you go, it's easier to implement efficiencies into government and invest taxpayers' dollars wisely. So the regional system really is run by the Department of Human Services at the state level, and I'm not sure they're gaining the efficiencies, and the efficiencies that they may be gaining, and I wouldn't call them efficiencies, more than just kind of hacksaw cuts to the system. They're having real life impact on families here in Linn County. Again, it goes to your quality of life. People, I know people that promote economic development, and I'm all for that, but you have to, people move here that, like Randy, that have children that have disabilities, and they want to know what kind of services you're going to provide when they take a job at Rockwell or Aegon or want to start a small business. And I think we failed on this front, and earlier it said maybe I sounded like a Republican. Well, I was a Republican for most of my life, but I think most people would agree that the party is going through a lot of changes right now. And so some people may be looking for alternatives, but I don't think, with regard to this issue, that it should be a Republican or a Democrat issue, and I see that in the legislature too much. Mental health and mental disabilities affect all political families, and we need to make that investment for the least among us. That's the very basic function of government.
Tower Terrace Road. What is your view on the extension of Tower Terrace Road and the addition of entrance and exit ramps to Interstate 380?
Well, this is a project that I've worked very hard on, and I think it shows why you have to have 5 supervisors and why you have to have, why you need to understand why they're full-time. Tower Terrace Road, to be honest with you, is not a priority in Cedar Rapids. They have the next land up there to have developments that increase their tax base, but they have been in a petty fight with Hiawatha and other jurisdictions over economic development issues, and so if Tower Terrace doesn't go through, that won't help Hiawatha, so we kind of drag our feet on that. And it goes back to my pushy leadership. That's why I asked to be placed on the Metropolitan Planning Organization, which decides a lot of how federal funds that are allocated to our planning area are prioritized and spent. That's why I'm spending a lot of time with the DOT trying to get this in the 5-year plan. Because that's how you actually accomplish something rather than just saying you're for Tower Terrace. And you have to fight, to some degree, other people in your community who want to see those funds go somewhere else. So that's why sometimes I ruffle feathers by getting these things into the press, into the Gazette, into KCRG as issues, so you have to put these other people on the spot. And they're going to say they're against Tower Terrace, but that's the back story there that I've been working on. And now we have all the communities, Marion, Hiawatha, Linn County, Robbins, and begrudgingly Cedar Rapids, because they're not going to be against that, just for the development standpoint alone. But if you're going to annex land out there, you need to provide the ability for people to traffic, and we can't just throw it all on Blair's for Boyson Road, just hope for the best.
Well, this issue's already been settled, as far as I know. It's, you know, it's gonna be a done deal. I didn't know Mr. Olson was the one that did it. Thank you, Brett, for doing that, I guess. If you're the one that had all that brilliant idea to do Callister Swart Road, but as far as I know, it's been, like you said, tied up, and I agree with the bureaucracy of Hiawatha and Cedar Rapids. But I guess I can't really comment on the issue because it's going to happen, and no matter what side of the issue we're on, it's pretty much a dead issue. The Tower Stairs Road's going to happen, and I do think, though, it will be a good thing. The change is sometimes very difficult to people, but it will hopefully take some traffic and open up that area. So,
He'd like to respond.
yeah.
Tower Terrace is not a done deal. It's not a done deal. That's because it needs advocates, and I'm certainly not saying that I'm the only advocate for it. I'm one of many advocates for it. I'm one of many people who are pushing hard for Tower Terrace. Lon Pluckham, the city manager of Marion, has been a warrior on this. Nick Glue, Marion Economic Development Corporation, of which I'm a board member, has been a warrior on this. Marion, this is vital for Marion, and they are putting their own skin in the game by completing portions of Tower Terrace. But the Tower Terrace interchange is key, and you don't build a $25 million interchange without federal help, and you certainly don't do it without getting it into the DOT's 5-year plan. That's how they decide things. That's the portion that I can take some credit for, along with others, of actually meeting with Paul Trambino, the director of the DOT, making sure that we had a meeting where we could present to the DOT board, knowing, like one of the commissioners on the DOT board, to make sure that it was that it's a priority. Pushing that to get it in there so that we can actually accomplish it, rather than it sitting like it has for the last 20 years in a study, in an MPO and regional study, saying we should do this by 2040. No, you need to push, and that's the compelling case I make for why I should continue to be your county supervisor.
Did you want to respond, Mr. Ray?
I think about that, and I wouldn't want anybody to describe me that I'm pushy. I think that's a negative connotation. I'm cooperative, I'm aggressive, I am one that will get things done, and get things done in a manner in which all parties feel that they have been treated fairly. As far as taking in ruffling feathers, you're going to have disagreements, but they don't need to be disagreements that end up being either grudges or something that will cause problems in the future when dealing with people now that they won't talk to you, such as the city auditor and some of the supervisors, and getting along with each other and cooperating with each other. There's a difference between being pushy and being someone that's getting things done. And I want to be getting things done. I've gotten things done as a teacher, as a coach, as a businessman. I make decisions, and I'm going to make those decisions. But as far as Tower Terrace Road goes, and if it's maybe not a done deal, but it sure is, seems to me that it's going that direction. Obviously, it's very vital to Marion, which is dear to my heart because they're in my district, and it needs to be opened up. So I thank you for that.
On minimum wage, what's your opinion about the minimum wage plan? And a more specific question, the minimum wage issue affects small businesses more dramatically than larger employers. What plans do you have to encourage the growth of our small business sector? And we are going to.
Well, I spoke out against this at the city council, and I think it's well attended. I really do. I think it's well attended. But my question is what is it going to accomplish? What is the ultimate goal for minimum wage? If it's to lead people from poverty into another area that they're not going to be on government aid or government assistance, that's not going to make it. It's going to have to be $15, $18 an hour, and we're just not at that stage, and I don't think we're going to be. I don't see minimum wage. I see it as basically as Tim, as a businessman, will tell you, and myself, and it's driven by the economy. I asked my class for 2 years in a row who was making $7.25. None of the kids were making that. They were making well over that. It went from $7.25. How many of you making $7.75? How many are making $8? And a few of them, that kept going down snaps. Okay, how many? And they got up to about $10, $12 an hour. Some of these kids in high school are making. These are entry-level jobs. They're jobs that we need to take, and that as a person, if they're in a job that is an entry-level job like that, they're going to get paid more than minimum wage if they're at that stage. And my whole thing is what we're hoping to accomplish is that for the high school kid to buy more sneakers maybe, or to get more gas. Plus, again, like I said, smaller businesses are going to cut their staff. Can you imagine the person at the Dairy Queen, the lady there that's serving an ice cream is making $10.25? They barely staff what they have now, what they're paying out for wages, because wages is your top priority as far as when you're in business. So, no, I don't think the minimum wage being set. I think the economy will set the minimum wage.
Well, I have a slightly different view. I do think that the state should be the one, preferably, that would set the minimum wage. The problem has been is that the state won't address the issue. And even last year, the Governor Branson said, please, let's address the issue. And still, state legislature wouldn't address the issue. The Iowa Senate had a bill, and the House never even took it up. So then you started to, it's been 10 years. And so, yeah, I think the state should do that, but they've neglected their duty to do it. And so communities like urban counties, especially like Polk County and Linn County, we can address that issue. So I wasn't opposed because it'll hopefully push the legislature to actually do their job, and versus small business versus big business. Actually, I think it's the other way around from the studies I've read. It affects big business more. Your McDonald's and those kind of jobs I saw out there, they're starting at minimum wage, or just maybe 25 cents more than minimum wage, the jobs they're offering out of McDonald's. I met with several small business owners who thought they might be affected. I met with a woman that owned a Curves, and she was very worried. They said, well, do you do $300,000 a year in sales? No. I said, well, then it doesn't affect you. See, this ordinance has an exception for businesses with less than $300,000 in revenues. There were other, like daycare facilities that said, did you know you're exempted from this? So there's a list of exemptions in there. But it does benefit 18,800 people in Linn County, and most of those people are adults trying to raise a family or accomplish things, and I think that's a good thing. And so I would say, legislature, do your job. The governor even wants you to do it. You won't do it. So we're going to force you in. And I think that's pushing leadership, and I'm proud of that.
Again, I don't think you're going to accomplish raising a family on $10.25 if you even go that high. Again, these are entry-level jobs that we're talking about. As far as throwing the state legislators under the bus, I see that this could be a state issue, but there's always something to the other side, not being pushy, but listening to the other side of the story, that we are, most of us in Iowa, we believe it or not, we're from rural communities. I think it is over 50% of our population lives in towns less than 10,000 people. And these little towns, they're already hurting to get jobs and to get people to come there and to get a profit. And So to make it, I know it'd be very difficult looking at the state legislators to make a blanket statement about this is going to be the minimum wage. Because I'm sure it's a lot more expensive to live here in Cedar Rapids than it is some other areas. There's a lot more to it than just getting the wages. There's a lot to it. Also, some of Tim, myself, or running for the Linn County Store, we've written checks out. We've had payroll, and we know what it is to take that out. And you're not paying somebody minimum wage, $10.25. It's costing more than $10.25. You got other things to pay besides that. It's probably costing more like $13. And so I also think I'll kind of make a prediction here. I think Cedar Rapids will end up going to 825, and that'll be it. And other cities will opt out of it. And so the minimum wage right now, I think, is a political thing more than it is anything else. It's kind of strange that it would be brought up during a political year.
I think he's going to respond.
Well, see, because I'm out in the communities, actually presented to the Marion City Council and Central City Council on this issue, and Cedar Rapids, and they've all committed to do this first year and see what the legislature does, and that was exactly our plan. So that's what I'm hearing, even from the fairly conservative members of these city councils agree. I mean, it was not throwing the legislature in the bus, it's just revealing a fact. I mean, even the governor said, come on, send me a bill. So I just disagree with that. And then there were the prior forum, and then now I've heard the reference that about that you two are the only ones that have written out checks or produced a service or a good. And so that's just not true. I've also written out checks. I practiced law for 7 years and had employees and had to pay for my copier and for my light bill and all that. And I wasn't paid a salary. I mean, I ate what I killed. You know, that's that. I understand about having to meet a payroll. So I get that. But if you're going to have a minimum wage, and that's what we're talking about, we have a minimum wage, then you need to adjust it from time to time. And that's the debate. And I think the difference is that you think the market can set that. And in a textbook, sure, I agree with you that in theory the market should set that, just like land should go for its highest and best use. But when the government does come in and regulate reasonably, then you're interfering with the market. And here we've decided in this country we're going to have a minimum wage. If you're going to have a minimum wage, adjust it periodically. So they haven't done it. We have the ability to do it. And if the small towns want to opt out and vote against the minimum wage, that's their option. Win-win.
We've come to the end of the session. It's 9 o'clock. So I'm going to move into closing statements. We're going to begin closing with Mr. Elsa.
Well, I want to thank the League of Women Voters, and like I said earlier, I think when you run for office, you need to subject yourself to questions and examine where you want to take, the position that you're running for, where you want to take the organization that you're trying to lead. I'm probably never going to win like Mr. Congeniality, but that's it's not why I'm running. I wasn't running to pal around and make myself look good or feel better about myself. I've run to try to change my community, change my rectangle, change my sphere where I live. I'm grateful that I look at the Cedar Rapids Gazette endorsement. I don't put too much stock into newspaper endorsements, but what they wrote validates some of the things that I've done, because I felt like the position was not a political position. It was a community problem solver position. This is a $125 million enterprise financed by the taxpayers. And to some degree, I have a lot of influence over that because the people have put me in charge to make good decisions for them. And I meet with them all the time. That's why I think you see the mayor of Central City, the mayor of Bertram, former mayor, current mayor of Marion, supporting me, and various city council members, because I think they trust that I'm going to do the right thing by the community. With the budget, when I came in, wholesale changed how we budget in Linn County. Budgeting for outcomes. It was just going up 3% per year, and now they have to justify their expenditures. Whole host of other things, obviously on parks and recreation and secondary roads where I've provided key leadership, and I appreciate and just am very grateful for the citizens in trusting me with this position.
I too would like to thank the League of Women Voters and Mr. Olson for being here. One of the things that Mr. Olson has mentioned is his endorsements. There's going to be some people upset because his endorsement must be a little different than what I think is an endorsement, because these people I talk to are not exactly endorsing. But also 8 years is long enough to make a difference, and I don't think there has been quite the difference that needs to be done in the supervisor position with salary increases and with the confusion and with the different bickering between agencies there that we're all pretty much aware of. We need to be more transparent as far as our government. We need to know where our tax dollars are being spent. We need a lot more detail when it comes to that. We also, Mr. Olson mentioned about not being party affiliated. Well, that's true, but at the same time, when you switch parties and you take people's money, which Mr. Olson did, and did not give that money back to the party or to those individuals, I don't think that's right. I think the right thing to do is to give the money back. He has every right to switch parties. I have no problem with that. But as far as the finances, it should have went back to the individual people with no questions asked, and it should have also went back to the Republican Party, what the individual. But I do think that we need a bigger and better job description, not bigger, but a better job description of Linn County supervisors and of their time and what they're doing. And if they're doing their job, I don't think people are going to have a problem. They're not going to have a problem with their salaries. They're not going to have a problem of compensating them if they know exactly what their job description is and what they're doing as far as on the job. Again, I want to thank the audience too for being here tonight and taking time out to hear the issues, and I appreciate it. Thank you for doing this.
Thank you. I'd like to close the forum by thanking the candidates for their participation. I'd also like to thank Kirkwood for providing the facilities tonight, and remember, if you haven't already done so, vote. 411. Oh, well, I had announced it before. I don't know if you all heard about using 411. Were you all in the room when I discussed that before? Go to vote411.org. There are responses to local leagues, questions to local candidates, state leagues questions to state league candidates, or to state candidates, and then national league questions to national candidates. And you can get a lot more information if you go to vote411.org. All right? Thank you very much for your participation.